Okay, so we're on now. Um, so, hi, Dean. Yeah, we're here. We're doing this interview regarding the work you've been doing in prisons, spreading mindfulness practice. So, could you tell me just a little bit of context about what this work is and what you've been doing?
Yeah, sure. With the support of the community, I've been offering Thai's teachings and practice in prisons for about a year, 2 prisons in particular. And the type of things that we do are mindful sitting, mindful breathing, mindful sharing, sometimes mindful walking. And earlier this year, we offered, with the support of Vari McCluskey, who's another Dharmacharya, and a guy called Bill Crook, who works with Extinction Rebellion, actually, up in Scotland. We offered the 5 mindfulness trainings to about 8 prisoners in a prison in Wales. And then we travelled on to Merseyside and offered the mindfulness trainings to another couple of prisoners in another prison there. So that's roughly what we've been doing. And then also I've been working with forensic psychology in a couple of the prisons and getting referrals from them. The 5 mindfulness trainings are sometimes can be a bit off-putting to non-Buddhist practitioners or non-spiritual practitioners. So we've been running another program, a little bit like Be Calm, Be Happy, but more accessible to people that come from offending backgrounds. And yeah, we've offered 8-week programs to them also. And currently I'm doing some co-production with those prisoners to see if we can make it even more accessible, because sometimes some of the men have ADHD, learning difficulties and autism, and find the way that we communicate some of our mindfulness practices difficult to understand.
Thanks for sharing that, Dean. And could you this isn't one of the questions I sent you beforehand, but can you give me a flavour of how the prisoners you've been working with react to the mindfulness practices? How, initially and then over time, what's their reaction been?
Some of the men that come to the practices which are leading towards offering the 5 mindfulness trainings are fairly open and trusting with the practice and wholehearted in their practice while they're with me for an hour or 2, and sometimes encourage other men to come. So that's really reassuring for us. And just as one example, one of the ceremonies last in February, I turned up to it with Bill and with Vari, and it was like coming to a COI retreat. The energy in the room, the silence, the stillness was wholehearted. It was quite wonderful, and they keep coming back. However, some of the men that come to the group work that I do, offering Thai's teachings and mindfulness, linked with some psychological, clinical aspects, because if they're suffering from trauma, if they're suffering from mental health issues, there needs to be a balance between what we offer and being sensitive to trauma. They can be skeptical, not trusting, disruptive. It can be a challenge sometimes, but staying with them, offering them a bit of compassion, some forbearance. After a few weeks, people begin to settle. Some people leave, but some people begin to settle. And I've had some beautiful letters from some of the men that have now left. Some of the men have written in the magazine, the prison magazine, about how transformative mindfulness practice is.
So you mentioned there some of the challenges. Is there any other challenges that have come in this work that you found difficult?
Yeah, probably like you, because I know you a little bit, we tend, if I see a need, I quite often want to meet it. I want to take some action to actually see if I can help. And sometimes, I guess I couldn't have even done this work 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I guess I couldn't have done this work, because I came to the practice because of my own anger and my own despair. About 25 years ago, I came to this practice because of it. I'm ex-army. I've had an interesting childhood and adolescence. So I've learned certain skills, and I can empathize with some of the men in custody in the criminal justice system. And if I'm not careful, I think sometimes I could burn myself out. Sometimes, not so much now, but I can see it sometimes coming up. The anger, the fear, the despair that's there, I can see it impacting on me. I can see the seeds coming up. And so I have to take quite a lot of space and time and keep looking to make sure that I've got more wholesome seeds in me than unwholesome seeds, so I can offer some stability, some peace, some guidance to some of the men where that's going on. So I think there's some internal stuff that I continue to have to deal with. One of the positives has been having a second body, having somebody that I can talk to that will tell me to slow down, because I have a nature to push myself physically and mentally, and not always have the nature to take that lazy day, to turn off the computer, to turn off the phone, to not treat myself so pushy. My mind and my body is always going. So having a second body to remind me to slow down, to nourish myself, is really useful. The prison on the outside, the prison regime's a difficult one. It's a challenging one. And quite often there's disruption simply by the nature of the people that are there, simply by the regime that's there. Sometimes men don't turn up, so I have to ring up and speak very clearly to some of the prison officers about the need for them to come. It's a challenging environment to be mindful.
I can imagine. And you already mentioned, we mentioned the 5 mindfulness training transmission ceremonies, but can you speak to any of the kind of highlights or the high points or things you felt have been success or made all that effort worthwhile?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, it was just wonderful to have 8 of the men I've been working with for 6 months wanting to take the transmissions and still coming back. Some of the people that are on long-term or medium-term sentences still coming back to the session after once a week. It's quite incredible, and that they're talking about it in such positive ways. One particular chap I remember who in the work, it's very easy to exclude people that you feel are disrupting the majority of the group. It just takes a couple of lines on the computer and an individual will not come again. You can ensure they don't come again. And I'm quite patient because I know mindfulness is a great help. But there was one chap in the group who I was having to weigh up each week. Shall I exclude this guy? Nearly every week I was saying, shall I exclude this guy or not? And I kept with him because a couple of times he had shown that he could sit, and some of the other men were supporting him as well. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to keep with you. And then, as you know, I took a few months off for health reasons. And when I came back, he'd left the prison. He'd left custody. And he'd written me a letter about it was the most he used this word. It's the most compassionate environment I've ever found myself in. Thank you. So that's one of the biggest successes for me. And the fact that there's men there that ask their colleagues to come as well. That's a major success. And the fact that men near the end of the sentences will ask me if there are places that they can practice this when they get out, when they leave the prison. And I've got some work to do there around convincing the community to be welcoming and to understand the nature of some of the men that might come to our sanghas.
Wow, that's really inspiring to hear that, Dean. Thank you. I really appreciate those things that have happened. Finally, I just want to ask if there are any kind of Sangha members who feel inspired to share the practice outside of a kind of a usual Sangha context. It might not be a prison, but just outside the normal way, with the normal kind of Plum Village way we practice. Do you have any kind of offerings of advice, or what would you say to somebody in that situation?
Make sure that you can have a second body, somebody that will tell you the truth. I remember Vari saying, Dean, you need to slow down and you need to share this work you're doing with other people, which I'm now doing. So have a second body. Look at yourself closely, practice deeply. Make sure you have the energy and the practice of stability and some peace to take into whatever environment you're going into, whether it's Extinction Rebellion, whether it's prisons, whether it's other environments that might cause you as a practitioner a challenge. Ideally, work with a Sangha, have the support of a Sangha. I'm really grateful that the Boundless Heart Sangha of Chester is now willing to come into one of the prisons with me to work with some of the men. And keep practicing. Keep having lazy days. Make sure you have lazy days in our nature. Go into nature and spend time there. Oh, the other thing is, I just want to say is probably next year, I'm probably going to offer a retreat for people that are working in the criminal justice system or would like to, or working in prisons and would like to, because I think we've got enough understanding and knowledge now to actually share it with our Sanghas and others about how we can offer mindfulness in prisons.
Fantastic. That sounds like a really amazing opportunity to help this work spread further. So thank you for your time in answering those questions and helping us understand this work that's been happening.
You're welcome.